What's up guys? This week we have a fairly quick video, but it's all about the way we set up our clutches. We have a really cool one that just been laid, so let's check them out. Alright, so this is our basic setup that we prepare right before collecting our eggs. This is a little bin with a seal tight lid, and we basically put vermiculite that we will wet down with some warm water. And the consistency you want to have something that's a little flaky, but when you squish it down, it stays in the block like that. So you can compress it down and have something that's fairly solid. The thing you want to avoid is when you compress it down and you have something that when you squeeze it, there's water coming out of it. You can still see that when I squeeze it really, really hard, there's a little bit of water, but this is like when I squeeze that extremely hard. So if you squeeze it very gently and there's some water coming out, that means your vermiculite is too wet and it's not ideal for your snake. So once your bin is set up and your bin is ready, we'll be ready to collect the eggs. And right before collecting, actually, there are other things that you can use other than vermiculite. You can use perlite, and the principle would be the same. You would, basically just wet it down and then have the same ratio of water and vermiculite. I don't really have a ratio itself. I just go and I eyeball it. When you have that squeezing method, you really know when it's ready. But you could also use a water bottom with a kind of a thing to put the eggs on. There are a lot of different good tools that you could use. You have the easy hash trays and a bunch of other things. And I've seen some people, they just put foam and water over it, and it works perfectly fine. And then you have something where you put your eggs that are not in contact with water. That's the most important thing. You don't want your eggs to be in contact with the water. But basically, what we do with vermiculite or with perlite or with a water bottom, you want to have a higher humidity inside of the bin so your eggs keep that humidity inside and don't dry out. If it's too dry, your eggs will end up drying out. And this is something that happens sometimes. You have a lot of eggs in the incubator and some of the eggs are at the back or whatever, and you don't really see them. So we like to go and check for our eggs at least twice during incubation to be sure that everything is doing all right. All right, so the pairing was a pastel orange dream puzzle with a Mojave lace female. Obviously, the goal is to have some lace hat puzzle. This is a first-time mom. She's actually a little old. She is, she's a 2015. There are a lot of techniques to actually collect the eggs. Most of the time, the female won't be too aggressive, but some girls, like this one, is extremely defensive. They're not aggressive, sorry, but they're defensive of the eggs, and this one is not an exception. So normally what you would do, you would try to go and just gently tap her like that to make her go away and look away like that. There you go. And once she's, a little calmer, she focuses on my hand, I can gently remove her like that. And, she's trying to bite, but that's fine. And you just put her aside and everything's fine. And now you can collect the eggs. You could also, if you don't want to play with your hands like this, you can also just use a paper towel roll and just tap on her head and she will move by herself. So, you can do it with your hands if you are confident enough that you won't get bit like this, even if she strikes, but the paper towel roll method works extremely well. So we have seven beautiful eggs. We'll check for veins. Actually, sometimes they do stick at the bottom of the tub. You want to go extremely gently with them. If you go too hard, you might rip the egg shell that are fairly thin. So you're going. Yeah, she's looking at you, eh? So you want to go extremely gently there. You don't want to rip any egg, even though you could rip them and they would still be fine. This is something that you really want to avoid. So we'll put that female back. We'll actually, basically what we will do after that, we will soak the female for about 30 minutes so she can drink again and get rehydrated. And we will clean the tub entirely, remove the substrate, get some good disinfectant at the bottom of the tub, clean everything because the eggs have a strong smell that attached to the female and the tub. So you really want to clean that to make sure that you basically press the reset button for your female so that way she can go back on feeding again and start to gain her weight back and prepare her for the next season. This is really important to do. Sometimes when you just, you clean the female, you put some new substrate, you clean the bin, Sometimes they don't go back on food directly, and if they're still really coiled, I would suggest to actually clean the female once again. There's not much to do other than just put the light on them and make sure that they are good veins, and we will just place them over there. We don't separate anything when it's, you know, placed like this. There's no really need for that. Sometimes when we do separate something is when the eggs are actually attached on top of each other and they just create a very high pile. That's not really what we want, because we don't want the eggs to touch the lid where the humidity might accumulate, and you know, eggs touching a lot of humidity is not ideal. So, you know, in this setup we don't touch anything, so that's it. So we'll just basically look for the veins now. All right, so when you're looking for the veins, you can basically do this with your phone. You can have a flashlight or whatever. You'll just grab the egg, put the light on it, and you see directly all the veins. You can still see the embryo that's going to be right on my thumb here. I don't know if you can really tell, but that's like a more darker part of the egg, and you see all the veins. You will also see, I don't know if you really see it on this one, but we'll check more eggs. You want to have that embryo on top. There's also going to be a hair bubble that you really can see there. You can still see the air, what did it say, hair bubble? Yeah, that's bad. Air bubble, and the embryo is actually in the middle of that. So you want to have that on top of your egg. So you don't want to have like your embryo on the side, although when they're just freshly laid, the embryo will probably, you know, place itself. But after a few days, you don't want to have it upside down like this, where, you know, all the veins are at the bottom, the embryo is at the bottom. This will most likely kill your baby snake inside of there. So that's not what you want. When they're all attached like this, most of the time, I don't even move any of them. Even if the embryo is a little sideways, I don't really move anything, because this one's on top, this one's on top, this one's a little on the side, this one's a little on the side as well, and this one is although a little on the side. You don't necessarily need to move anything, because as I said, like this female just laid today, the embryo will move a little bit and will place itself. It's really after a few days that the embryo really sticks to the egg and won't really move at this point. There you want to have it placed properly. I don't mark my eggs either. You know, I see a lot of people that are just putting a little line on them. By this setup, even if I move the bin, the container on each way, nothing's going to move. So we basically don't do that. It's not something that we find necessary. You can do it, you know, put a little mark there. If the eggs roll during incubation, you will know where to actually, you know, place it back. And let's say you wanted to maybe separate two eggs. We'll just open the light again. What you would do to separate those eggs, you would just grab them very gently, and when they're just laid like this, the bond between the two eggs is fairly, you can go even closer, the bond between the two eggs is fairly, you know, easy to detach. You just go very gently, and although they stick together like this, by going very gently, they are not difficult at all to rip apart. And what I like to do also, I like to put pressure right at the exact spot where I'm actually pulling, so just prevent them from actually ripping. So by doing this, you'll just prevent anything bad, and there you go. So that egg is actually removed from the attached eggs, and as you remembered, the embryo is a little bit on the side, so I'm just going to rotate it a little bit and place it like that. So this is what you would do basically to place your eggs inside of an incubation bin. I'll also like to bury them just a little bit. It gives them a bit more of humidity on each sides, just like, I don't know if it's really useful, but that's how I've always done it. I'll do it like that, and there you go. All right, last little trick that I've learned from Mark Mandic on his Instagram page, which is kind of interesting actually. You can use a brush when you use cocoa fiber, cocoa husk, or any kind of substrate that might actually stick to the eggs when they're laid. They're extremely sticky, so the substrate might just sticks to the egg. And if you want to remove that, you can use a little brush like this and really gently brush your eggs off like that, and you will remove some of that accumulation of substrate that you could have on your eggs. I don't really do it all the time, but sometimes some eggs are extremely dirty. The accumulation of substrate, the fine powder of the substrate is just extreme on the eggs. I like to use that brush sometimes, just a little brush on the eggs, and that way, you know, there's nothing's gonna stick on the egg or humidity or anything that you don't want. So sideways, the eggs are not touching anything on top. Obviously they're flat, but when you have a pile, when you put your lid, you don't want to have anything touching the lid, and also you don't want to have anything touching the sides where the humidity might accumulate. And especially towards the end of incubation, there's a lot of humidity that's going to build inside of that box, so you don't want to have any eggs touching where it could the accumulation of humidity could like create some mold on the eggs, and it's not ideal. Some eggs, sometimes you will have maybe one egg that had weak vein or something went bad and the embryo died inside of you incubation for any reasons, and one egg might just rot. Most of the time I leave it there, especially if it's one of those eggs that are attached. I won't go and try to rip them out and whatever. I just leave it there, and it's gonna most likely just rot, and all the other eggs, even though they're touching, will be fine. That's something we see a lot of time. There's also one thing that I've realized in the past year that might happen sometimes. Some eggs will have a bit of swelling. I don't know if it's because the substrate is too wet, or just a deformity in the egg, or a lack of something in the shell. I have no clue about that, but some eggs will start to swell. You will see like there's like an accumulation of water on top of an egg. So what I like to do, I just like to come in, check my eggs maybe a week and a half, or 2 weeks after I've put them in the incubation bin. I'll take a Scott towel and I'll just wipe down the accumulation of humidity outside of the egg on the shell, and that most of the time will dry out and will be perfectly fine. I feel like if you leave it there for too long, you get that risk of having too much humidity on your egg and might just have your egg went bad. Last year, I've had a beautiful clutch of 9 eggs from my super orange dream yellow belly fire pinstripe female to the het monsoon male. They all had that swelling going on, so they were all getting wet, and I was kind of freaking out because that was a really important clutch for me, especially to make het monsoons, posset monsoons. And what I did, I just placed a layer of a thin plastic bag underneath the eggs, and I just every day I was wiping them down to remove the excess water, and I actually saved the clutch that way. I think that if I were to let them go and just had that accumulation of water on top of the egg, they would just have rotten and went bad. So that's why I've never used press and seal, because I go and I check the eggs fairly often. All right, so I hope that video was really helpful about how to set up your eggs and what to look for, and some little tips on what to do to make sure that your incubation will go perfectly fine. I think eventually we'll do a egg cutting video about like what we look for and when to cut, how to cut if you have to do it, the pros and cons of cutting, why you should cut, why you should not cut, and you can take your own decision at this point. It's also good for people that are not into the ball python, when you look at such videos, that you have a better understanding of the reason why we do some things. And it can be extremely graphic sometimes to cut an egg when you don't really know why we do it. But if we explain to you the process of why and what we're looking for when you do it, it might just help everybody to understand the reason why a lot of breeders actually do cut eggs. So that was it for today. We'll do that eventually. Hope you really enjoyed it. Be sure to comment down below. I want to know, guys, do you cut eggs? Are you team cut or no cut? And how do you set up your eggs? Do you use vermiculite, perlite, water-based bottom? And I hope this video was extremely helpful. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube, go follow us on Instagram, and check out our Morph Market page. On this, cheers, and see you next week.